wherever you are in this moment. Maybe you're sitting on a bus with your earphones in, or alone in your room at the end of a long day, or perhaps trying to find a little quiet amid the noise of life. I want you to know that you've arrived at a place where your heart can truly rest. Welcome to Where Hearts Rest. I know that taking 90 minutes for yourself in this busy world isn't easy. Maybe you've postponed listening to this many times, or perhaps you're feeling a bit skeptical, wondering if yet another voice can truly understand what you're going through. I understand that feeling. We've heard too many promises about finding peace, too many quick answers to the deep questions of the heart. Maybe you're tired of feeling like you're always missing something, always waiting for someone or something to make everything okay. There's something I want to share with you today. A story about the moment we're all perhaps waiting for, the moment when we stop feeling like lost puzzle pieces, stop believing that happiness lies somewhere out there, and discover that what we've been searching for has always been here. Do you know that feeling when you're exhausted from having to prove yourself? When you're worn out from feeling like you're not good enough, not strong enough, not enough? When you look at other people and wonder why they seem to know some secret that you don't? If that sounds familiar, then you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to explore 7 movements of awakening together. Not as steps you need to follow, but as gentle discoveries about what has always belonged to us. We'll walk through moments you've probably lived, the lonely times, the self-doubting times, the longing times, and discover how they can become doorways to freedom. Before we begin, I want you to know that this isn't some stranger's story. This is our story of human beings trying to figure out how to live with an open heart in a world that sometimes feels too harsh. Breathe with me for a moment. Feel your feet touching the ground. Notice that right in this moment, you are safe. You are being cared for. And however you're feeling right now, tired, skeptical, hopeful, or all of it at once, all of it is welcome here. Because this story of coming home, it doesn't begin when you're ready. It begins when you're brave enough to admit that the old way isn't working anymore. And your being here right now is perhaps evidence of that very courage. We'll discover together how recognizing our shared humanity, the fact that we all carry these same longings, these same fears, these same deep desires to be truly seen and loved, becomes the foundation for a love so vast, so unconditional, that it changes everything. So settle in, dear friend. Let your heart be curious about what's possible. Let your mind be open to what you might not have considered before. And most importantly, let yourself be exactly as you are right now. Our journey together begins now. You know that room, don't you? The room where you sit at 3 a.m., mindlessly scrolling your phone, searching for something. You don't know exactly what, but you'll know it when you see it. Maybe it's a text from that person. Maybe it's the perfect job opportunity. Maybe it's just proof that your life will finally begin. There was someone, and I swear this person could be you, could be me, could be the friend you're thinking of right now, who had turned waiting into an art form. They waited for Friday to breathe. Waited for weekends to live. Waited for Monday to, oh wait, nobody waits for Monday. But you get what I mean, right? They waited like their life depended on it. And in fact, in some way, it had. Because they'd convinced themselves that real happiness lived at the end of the sentence, someday I'll be confident enough to say what I really think. Someday, I'll meet someone who gets me. Someday, I'll have enough money to stop worrying. Someday. And while waiting for that someday, they'd been missing today. Again and again. Can you feel the exhaustion in that? The feeling like you're living in the waiting room of your own life, watching other people get called while you're still sitting there with your old ticket stub, wondering when it'll be your turn. Hold on a second. I want to ask you something. Right now, in this moment, what are you waiting for? You don't have to answer out loud. Just let that question sit there. Because I guarantee you, there's something. There always is. Then there was a day, and this day comes to everyone, sooner or later, when this person sat in that same waiting room, looking at that same phone, waiting for that same something to change. But instead of looking at the screen, this time, they looked up and saw themselves in the mirror across the room, but not the reflection they expected. Not the future version they'd been picturing, more confident, more successful, more loved. Just them. Right now. With eyes tired from looking ahead, with shoulders curved from carrying the weight of not enough yet. And for the first time, instead of saying, I'll be happy when, they asked a different question. What if there's never a when? Sounds scary, doesn't it? But you know what? It wasn't scary. It was liberating. Because the moment they asked that question, they realized something. All those years of waiting, they weren't really waiting for a better life. They were waiting for permission to live the life they already had. They were waiting for someone to give them permission to love themselves. Waiting for circumstances to allow them to feel good enough. Waiting for the world to say, okay, now you can be happy. And they realized, with lightning bolt clarity, that permission was never coming from outside. It had always been here. In this room. In this moment. In this breath. Can you feel that shift? The moment when I'll be happy when becomes I could be happy right now if. That's the moment everything started to crack open. Buddha, 500 years ago, sitting under the Bodhi tree, discovered the same thing. But he didn't call it sitting by the window. He called it dukkha. Dukkha isn't just life sucks. It's more subtle than that. It's the feeling that no matter what you have, something's still missing. The feeling that you're living your life like it's a trailer for the real movie. You know that feeling, right? When you achieve something you thought would make you happy, and for the first moment, it does. Then after a week, 2 weeks, you're back in the same old place, looking at the next thing. That's dukkha. The basic unsatisfactoriness of looking for something permanent, in a temporary world. But here's the beautiful part. Buddha didn't stop at pointing out the problem. He said, "Hey, I found the cause, and I found how to fix it." The cause? We've confused wanting with needing. Between "I want this" and "I need this to be okay." The fix? Not to stop wanting, but to stop believing that your happiness depends on getting what you want. Sounds too simple to actually work, right? But think about it. When was the last time you were truly, truly happy? Not because you got something, but just because you were alive in that moment. Maybe when you were laughing with friends until your stomach hurt. Maybe when you watched the sunset and forgot everything else. Maybe when you hugged someone and felt, just for that second, that everything was perfect as it was. In those moments, you weren't waiting for anything. You were just there. That's where freedom lives. Not in getting what you want, but in wanting what you have. In this moment. Right now. Before we go any further, I need to tell you this. If you recognize yourself in this story, if you feel exposed, seen in a way that makes you uncomfortable, I want you to know you're not alone. I want you to put your hand on your heart right now. Feel that warmth. Feel that heartbeat. It's been there through every moment of waiting, every disappointment, every maybe tomorrow. And I want you to say to that heart, thank you. Thank you for caring so much about our happiness. Thank you for keeping hope alive, even when everything seemed impossible. Because here's the truth. The part of you that's been waiting wasn't wrong. It was trying to protect you. Trying to make sure you didn't settle for less than you deserve. The problem was, it thought deserve meant something different than this. But what if deserve actually meant exactly this, right now, as it is? Breathe with that thought. What if you already deserve love, peace, happiness, not because you earned it, but because you exist? What if waiting has just been a habit and presence is just practice? What if, right in this moment, with everything exactly as it is, you could choose contentment instead of waiting? Not because you're giving up on dreams, but because you realize that happiness wasn't hiding behind those dreams. It was hiding behind thinking that you needed those dreams to be happy. Take a deep breath with me. Feel into the possibility that maybe, just maybe, what you've been searching for was never missing. Maybe it's always been here, waiting for you to stop looking everywhere else and simply notice. And with that recognition, with that kindness toward the part of you that's been struggling for so long, we're ready to explore. What happens when someone steps away from that window and starts discovering what's actually been here all along? Because that's exactly where our story takes us next. Picture this. Someone walking down the street, and they look completely normal on the outside. But if you could see what they're really carrying, you'd be amazed they can even move. On their left shoulder, a heavy bag labeled "Mom's Expectations." It's stuffed with all the career paths she mentioned over dinner. All the times she said, "I just want you to be successful," which somehow translated to, "I need you to prove I was a good parent." On their right shoulder, Dad's unspoken disappointments. This one's particularly heavy because it's full of all the things he never said but his silence screamed. The sports he wished they'd played. The confidence he hoped they'd have. The version of strength he thought they should embody. Around their waist, a belt made of old friends' opinions. Each buckle hole represents a time they changed themselves to fit in, to be liked, to avoid that terrible feeling of being left out. In their pockets, small but impossibly dense stones. Each one is a comment from a stranger on social media, a teacher who said they'd never amount to much, a person who laughed at their dreams. And in their hands, a suitcase that gets heavier every day, packed with society's blueprint for a life worth living. Get the degree, get the job, get the relationship, get the house, get the validation, get the approval, get until you can finally, what? Feel like you matter? Sound familiar? Here's the thing that'll blow your mind. This person, let's call them Alex, because Alex could be anyone, never consciously chose to pick up any of these bags. They just appeared. Started small when Alex was young and someone said, "Good job," and their heart lit up. So they thought, "Oh, that's how I get love. I perform and people approve." And year by year, bag by bag, stone by stone, they built their entire identity around being what other people needed them to be. But here's the question that changed everything. What happens when you get so good at carrying other people's dreams that you forget you ever had your own? It started with a simple moment. Alex was at work, a job they'd taken because it sounded impressive at parties, not because it made their soul sing and their boss complimented them on a project. "Great work, Alex. This is exactly what we needed." Send. And instead of feeling proud, Alex felt empty. Like they'd just gotten an A on a test for a subject they never wanted to take. That's when it hit them. They'd become so good at reading what other people wanted that they'd lost track of what they wanted. They could tell you their mother's dream for them, their father's hopes, their friends' expectations, their partner's needs, their boss's priorities. But if you asked them what they actually wanted, radio silence. It was like they'd become a human-shaped collection of other people's wishes, walking around pretending to be a person. And the most twisted part? Everyone told them how thoughtful and accommodating they were. How easygoing. How they never caused problems. They'd become addicted to approval like some people become addicted to substances. That little hit of "good job," or "I'm proud of you," or even just "thanks," became their drug. And like any addiction, they needed more and more to feel okay. Alex started noticing the pattern everywhere. How they ordered food based on what sounded normal instead of what they actually craved. How they laughed at jokes that weren't funny because everyone else was laughing. How they nodded along to opinions they disagreed with because disagreeing felt dangerous. They realized they'd been living like they needed permission for everything. Permission to have preferences. permission to say no, permission to take up space, permission to exist as themselves instead of as everyone else's ideal version of who they should be. And here's the heartbreak of it. All those people whose approval they'd been chasing, most of them were too busy chasing someone else's approval to even notice Alex's performance. The mum worried about what her friends thought of her parenting. The dad was still trying to prove something to his own father who'd been dead for 10 years. The friends were performing their own versions of having it all together. The boss was desperately trying to impress their boss. It was approval seeking all the way up. Everyone performing for everyone else, and nobody actually present to enjoy the show. Have you ever felt that? Like you're acting in a play where everyone forgot to tell you what your actual lines were supposed to be? 2,500 years ago, Buddha figured out something that modern psychology is just catching up to. Seeking happiness through external validation is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. It doesn't matter how much you pour in, it's never going to hold. He called this pattern seeking approval from the world of form. In plain English, trying to feel good about yourself based on temporary, changeable things outside your control. Think about it. Other people's opinions? Temporary and changeable. Their moods, their own insecurities, their limited perspective, all of that is constantly shifting. So if your self-worth depends on their approval, you're basically building your emotional house on quicksand. Buddha taught that this kind of seeking creates what he called the second arrow. The first arrow is whatever happens. Maybe someone criticizes you, maybe they don't respond to your text, maybe they choose someone else for the promotion. That's just life. Stuff happens. But the second arrow, that's all the stories you tell yourself about what it means. They don't like me. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. I'll never be successful. That second arrow, that's the real suffering. And that arrow is self-inflicted. Here's what Buddha discovered that changed everything. You can't control the first arrow. Life is going to life. People are going to have opinions, and not all of them are going to be favorable to you. But the second arrow, that's entirely up to you. When Alex realized this, it was like someone had given them permission to put down bags they didn't even know they were allowed to set down. Because here's the beautiful truth. Other people's opinions about you are actually none of your business. I know that sounds crazy, but think about it. Their opinions are based on their limited perspective, their past experiences, their current mood, their own insecurities and projections. It's really more about them than it is about you. And more importantly, your worth was never up for vote. You don't need unanimous approval to exist. You don't need to earn your right to take up space. You don't need to prove you deserve love. You can just be yourself. Messy, imperfect, learning as you go yourself. And let other people have whatever opinions they're going to have about that. Here's something nobody tells you. Learning to disappoint people is a superpower. Not because you want to hurt anyone, but because the fear of disappointing others has been running your life. And when you realize that disappointing some people is not only inevitable, but necessary for your authentic expression, suddenly you're free. Alex learned this the hard way when they finally said no to something they didn't want to do. A family gathering that felt more like a performance review than a celebration. And when they said, "Actually, I'm not going to make it this time," the world didn't end. Some people were disappointed. Some people tried to guilt trip them. Some people made it about themselves, but we planned this for you. And Alex sat with all of that without rushing to fix it, without immediately apologizing and changing their mind. They discovered something revolutionary. Other people's disappointment didn't actually kill them. It was uncomfortable, sure, but it wasn't deadly. And on the other side of that disappointment was something they'd never experienced before: self-respect. For the first time in years, they'd honored their own truth instead of contorting themselves to fit someone else's expectations. And it felt scary and exhilarating and sad and liberating all at once. That's when Alex started understanding what Buddha meant about the middle way. Not swinging from people-pleasing to people-dismissing. Not from seeking approval to not caring about anyone. But finding that sweet spot where you can care about others without sacrificing yourself. Where you can be kind without being a doormat. Where you can love people without needing them to validate your existence. It's like learning to be a friend to yourself first, so you can be a real friend to others instead of a needy stranger asking them to fill the holes in your self-esteem. Before we go any further, I want to say something to the part of you that recognizes yourself in Alex's story. The part that's been carrying all those bags, trying so hard to be what everyone needs. You're not pathetic. You're not weak. You're not too sensitive, or too much, or not enough. You're someone who cares deeply about connection. Someone who learned early that love felt conditional, so you tried to meet all the conditions. Someone who wanted so badly to belong that you were willing to disappear to make it happen. Put your hand on your heart again. Feel that steadiness there. And say to yourself, thank you for trying so hard to make sure we were loved. Thank you for carrying all that weight because you thought it would keep us safe. Thank you for caring so much about other people's feelings. Now take a breath and say, it's okay to put some of these bags down now. It's okay to care about others without losing ourselves. It's okay to be disappointed and disappoint sometimes. It's okay to exist as we are, instead of as who we think we should be. Feel into what it would be like to love someone, maybe a child, maybe a pet, maybe your best friend, not because they performed perfectly or made you proud or never disappointed you, but just because they existed. Just because they were them, trying their best, figuring it out as they went. That same love, unconditional, unwavering, not dependent on performance, that's available for you too. From you to you. Right now. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop needing approval so desperately, people actually like you more. Because you're finally present as yourself instead of as your best guess of who they want you to be. An authentic presence is magnetic in a way that people-pleasing never is. So what happens when someone puts down those heavy bags and starts walking lighter through the world? What do they discover when they're not constantly performing for the balcony? That's where our story goes next. There's a morning, and you'll know this morning when it comes for you, when someone wakes up and looks in the mirror like they always do. But instead of seeing who they expected, instead of seeing the edited, filtered, improved version of themselves, they see the truth. And that truth shatters everything. Not in a dramatic way. No loud crash, no grand aha moment. It's more like when you put on prescription glasses for the first time and suddenly realize that leaves have individual edges. You've been living your whole life with blurry vision without knowing what you were missing. This person, let's call them Sam, had spent 30 years building a perfect image. Not just for others, but for themselves. They'd become an artist of, I'm fine. An artist of, everything's going according to plan. An artist of pretending their life was the Instagram version of reality. But this morning the mirror had had enough. It refused to reflect back the illusion. It simply told the truth. Sam saw the exhaustion in their eyes. Not just tired from lack of sleep, but tired from having to pretend. Tired from wearing the "I've got it all figured out" mask every day. Tired from living like they'd cracked the code of how to make life work when really they were just making it up as they went along like everyone else. For the first time, they saw the loneliness hiding behind the confident smile. They saw the insecurity lurking behind the achievements. They saw the scared child still waiting for someone to say, "You're doing it right," hiding behind the adult pretending to have all the answers. And in that moment, the mirror broke. Not the actual mirror. The mirror in their mind, the one that had been reflecting back the edited version of themselves for so long. You know that feeling, don't you? When you suddenly see yourself as you really are, instead of as you think you should be. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. Like when you finally admit to someone that you don't know what you're doing, and they say, "Me neither." Once the mirror broke, Sam couldn't unsee what they'd seen. It was like every layer of their life started to peel off, revealing what was really underneath. Layer 1. I know what I want in life. Reality. Most of their wants were actually what they thought they should want. The expensive car because it looked successful. This relationship because it looked stable. This job because it sounded impressive. They'd been living someone else's life without realizing it. Layer 2. I have everything I need to be happy. Reality. They'd been collecting experiences and possessions like Pokemon cards, thinking that if they had enough, they'd win the game of life. But happiness doesn't come from having. It comes from being. And they'd forgotten how to simply be. Layer 3. I'm strong and independent. Reality. They'd become addicted to being needed, to being the one everyone else leaned on, because it made them feel valuable. But deep down, they were desperate for someone to lean on too. They'd confused being useful with being loved. Layer 4. I've healed from my past. Reality. They'd buried their pain under layers of productivity and positivity. They'd become so good at functioning despite hurt that they convinced themselves they'd moved on. But you can't heal from something you refuse to feel. With each layer falling away, Sam felt lighter and more terrified. Lighter, because finally, they didn't have to pretend anymore. Terrified, because they had no idea who they actually were underneath all those masks. Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life? Like you've become so good at playing a role that you forgot it was just an act? That's what Buddhism calls ego death. Not literally dying, but the death of the false self, the constructed identity you thought you were. And it's absolutely necessary to discover the authentic self underneath. 2,500 years ago, a prince named Siddhartha had a similar moment of clarity. He'd spent 29 years living in a palace, protected from reality, thinking life was supposed to be perfect, painless, predictable. Then one day he stepped outside and saw illness, aging, death. And like Sam with the mirror, he couldn't unsee reality. The palace had become a lie he couldn't live with anymore. That was the first step of what Buddha called right view, seeing things as they actually are, instead of as we wish they were or fear they might be. Right view doesn't mean pessimistic view. It means clear view. Seeing that pain is part of life, not a sign that something's wrong. Seeing that everything changes, so clinging to anything causes suffering. Seeing that happiness doesn't depend on external circumstances, but on our internal relationship with reality. Most of us spend our lives wearing rose-colored glasses or shit-colored glasses. We either pretend everything's perfect or we're convinced everything's terrible. But right view is more like clear glasses, seeing beauty and ugliness, joy and sorrow, connection and loneliness, all as natural parts of human experience. When Sam's mirror broke, they weren't having a breakdown. They were having a breakthrough. Finally seeing clearly enough to stop fighting with reality and start working with it. Buddhism teaches that suffering doesn't come from pain itself, but from resistance to pain. From thinking that if we could just arrange life perfectly, pain would go away. But pain doesn't go away. We just get better at being with it, without letting it run our lives. Sam realized they'd spent so much energy trying to avoid discomfort that they'd avoided living. They'd become numb to both pain and joy in the process. After the initial shock of seeing clearly, Sam faced a choice. They could try to rebuild the walls, pretend the moment of clarity never happened, go back to comfortable delusions. Or they could stay with the uncomfortable truth and see where it led. Sam chose truth. And truth led somewhere unexpected, not to despair but to tenderness. For the first time, instead of judging themselves for being an imperfect, scared, confused human being, Sam felt compassion. Like they were looking at a beloved friend who was struggling and wanting to offer comfort. This was a radical shift. From, I should be different, to, I am what I am, and that's okay. From, I need to fix myself, to, maybe I was never broken. They started talking to themselves differently. Instead of the internal critic saying, "You're such a mess," the internal voice became gentle. "You're doing your best. You're learning. You're human." Sam discovered that acceptance doesn't mean resignation. It doesn't mean, "I'll never grow or change." It means, "I'll start from where I actually am, instead of from where I think I should be." It's like the difference between trying to plant seeds in concrete, forcing change from a place of self-rejection, versus planting seeds in fertile soil, allowing change from a place of self-compassion. When you accept yourself as you are, paradoxically, that's when real transformation becomes possible. Because you're no longer using all your energy fighting with the reality of who you are right now. Have you noticed that? How much energy you spend arguing with your own experience? I shouldn't feel this way. I should be over this by now. I should be further along. All that should-ing on yourself is exhausting, and it doesn't actually create change. It creates resistance. One of the most beautiful parts of Sam's experience was realizing that once they stopped hiding from themselves, they stopped hiding from others too. They started having real conversations instead of performance conversations. Instead of "everything's great," they might say, "Actually, I'm struggling a bit." Instead of pretending to have answers, they admitted uncertainty. And a magical thing happened. People liked them more, not less. Real vulnerability created deeper connections than the perfect facade ever had. Sam learned that most people weren't looking for someone who had it all figured out. They were looking for someone real, someone they could relate to, someone who reminded them that being human is messy, and that's normal. Suddenly, relationships became about genuine connection instead of mutual performance. Conversations had depth. Silence became comfortable instead of something to fill with chatter. Sam realized they'd been so afraid of being seen as flawed that they'd never allowed themselves to be truly seen at all. And without being seen, you can't feel truly loved, because people are loving your mask, not you. Breaking that mirror freed Sam to be authentic, and authenticity is surprisingly magnetic. Not because perfect people are attractive, but because real people are relatable. And feeling understood is one of the deepest human needs. I want to invite you into an exercise right now. Look around the room you're in, not with your eyes, but with your inner vision. What masks are you wearing right now? What parts of yourself are you trying to hide, even from yourself? Maybe it's insecurity about your intelligence. Maybe it's loneliness you don't want to admit. Maybe it's anger you think you shouldn't feel. Maybe it's fear about the future. Maybe it's grief you think you should be over by now. Whatever it is, instead of pushing it away, can you get curious about it? Can you say, "Oh, there's that fear again," with the same tone you might say, "Oh, there's my neighbor walking their dog." Place your hand on your heart. Feel that steady rhythm, proof that you're alive, you're here, you're worthy of compassion simply because you exist. Say to whatever you're trying to hide, "I see you." You're part of my human experience. You don't make me broken or wrong. You make me human. This isn't about indulging every feeling or letting emotions run your life. It's about creating space for the full spectrum of human experience without judgment. Buddhism teaches that what we resist persists. What we accept transforms. Not because we force it to change, but because acceptance creates fertile ground for natural evolution. Sam discovered that once they stopped fighting with their imperfections, those imperfections stopped controlling them. Fear became information instead of enemy. Sadness became teacher instead of weakness. Uncertainty became adventure instead of threat. Take a breath with me. Feel into the possibility that maybe, just maybe, all parts of you, even the ones you've been trying to change or hide, are welcome here. Maybe breaking the mirror of illusion isn't destruction, but liberation. Maybe seeing yourself clearly is the first step toward loving yourself completely. And with that foundation of radical self-acceptance, something beautiful becomes possible, learning to speak to your own heart with the language of love. After Sam's mirror broke, and they saw themselves clearly for the first time, something remarkable happened. They started hearing a voice they'd never really listened to before. Not the loud, critical voice that usually ran the show, the one that pointed out every flaw and failure. This was different. Quieter. Kinder. It started small. One morning, instead of the usual mental assault of, "You're behind schedule," "You look terrible, you're not doing enough," there was a gentle whisper, "Good morning. How are you feeling today?" Sam actually paused. When was the last time anyone, including themselves, had asked how they were feeling and actually wanted to know the answer? The voice continued, "You look tired. What do you need right now?" It was like discovering they'd had a wise, compassionate friend living inside them all along, but the noise of self-criticism had been too loud to hear them. Have you ever noticed how you talk to yourself? I mean, really listen to the running commentary in your head. Most of us have an inner critic that makes Gordon Ramsay look gentle. We say things to ourselves that we would never, ever say to someone we love. But what if, and stay with me here, what if you could become your own best friend instead of your own worst enemy? Sam began experimenting with this new voice. When they made a mistake at work, instead of, "You're such an idiot," the voice said, "That didn't go as planned. What can we learn from this?" When they felt lonely, instead of, "You're pathetic for needing people," it said, "Loneliness is hard. You're human, and humans need connection." It felt revolutionary. Like they'd been living in a house where they only used one room and suddenly discovered there were other floors filled with warmth and light. What Sam was discovering is something Buddhism has taught for centuries. The practice of loving, kindness, or metta begins with how we speak to ourselves. The Buddha taught that we have roughly 65 zero thoughts per day. Imagine if even half of those thoughts were kind instead of cruel. How would that change your experience of being alive? In traditional Buddhist practice, Loving kindness meditation starts with sending love to yourself before extending it to others. This isn't selfishness, it's practical wisdom. You can't give what you don't have. If your well of self-compassion is empty, you'll just be sharing your depletion with others. The practice goes like this. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. Simple words, but radical when you've spent years at war with yourself. Sam started using this practice, but they made it more conversational, more personal. Instead of formal phrases, they check in with themselves like they would with a dear friend. How's your heart today? What's weighing on you? What would feel nourishing right now? Buddhism teaches that the mind is like a garden. For years, Sam had been watering the weeds of self-criticism and wondered why flowers of self-love wouldn't grow. But when you start watering different seeds of kindness, understanding, patience with yourself, suddenly the garden begins to transform. The critical voice didn't disappear overnight. It had been the default setting for decades. But now there was another voice offering a different perspective. And gradually, Sam learned to tune into the kinder frequency more often. Here's what nobody tells you about changing your inner dialogue. It feels weird at first. Sam felt like they were talking to an imaginary friend. This is ridiculous, the critical voice would say. You're being soft. You're losing your edge. But Sam persisted, and something beautiful started happening. The kinder they were to themselves, the kinder they became to others. When you stop being at war with your own humanity, you stop being at war with everyone else's humanity too. They noticed it first with their partner. Instead of getting irritated when their partner was stressed, Sam would think, they're having a hard time, just like I do sometimes. Instead of taking things personally, they could hold space for their partner's struggles with the same compassion they were learning to offer themselves. It showed up at work too. When a colleague made a mistake, instead of internal judgment, Sam felt understanding. We're all doing our best with what we know right now. This is the ripple effect of self-compassion. It doesn't make you soft or weak. It makes you brave enough to stay open-hearted in a world that can be harsh. Sam learned to recognize the different voices in their head and choose which one to listen to. The critical voice that sounded like past hurts and other people's judgments. The anxious voice that tried to control everything. The wise voice that offered perspective. And the loving voice that offered comfort. They started asking themselves throughout the day, what does love say right now? When facing a difficult decision, what would someone who truly loved me advise? When feeling stuck, how would I help a friend in this situation? Slowly, Sam became their own loving parent, wise mentor, and best friend all rolled into one. Let me invite you into something right now. Put your hand on your heart and ask yourself, how am I really doing today? Not the automatic fine that you give everyone else. Actually pause and listen. What comes up? Maybe exhaustion you've been ignoring. Maybe excitement you've been too busy to feel. Maybe sadness you've been pushing away. Maybe gratitude you haven't acknowledged. Now, whatever you heard, can you respond with kindness? Not trying to fix or change anything, just acknowledging, I hear you. I see you. Your feelings matter. This is the beginning of learning your heart's language. Most of us are fluent in the language of the head, analyzing, planning, worrying. But the heart speaks differently. It speaks in feelings, in sensations, in quiet knowing. Sam discovered that their heart had been trying to communicate for years, but they'd been too busy listening to their mind's constant chatter to hear it. Their heart had been saying, I'm lonely, while their mind said, you should be grateful for what you have. Their heart said, this job doesn't fit anymore, while their mind said, you can't leave, it's too risky. Learning to listen to their heart didn't mean ignoring their mind. It meant creating dialogue between them. The heart provides the compass. The mind provides the map. The heart knows the destination. The mind figures out the route. Buddhism calls this the middle way, not being ruled by emotions, but not dismissing them either. Finding the wise balance between feeling and thinking, between intuition and logic. As Sam got better at this inner dialogue, something profound shifted. They realized they'd been looking outside themselves for things they could actually provide for themselves. Waiting for others to validate their worth instead of recognizing it themselves. Seeking comfort from others instead of learning to comfort themselves. Looking for someone else to understand them instead of understanding themselves first. This doesn't mean becoming isolated or not needing others. Humans are wired for connection. But there's a difference between needing others to complete you and wanting others to share life with you. When you become fluent in the language of your own heart, you can show up in relationships as a whole person rather than a collection of unmet needs. You can love others without needing them to fix you. You can receive love without the desperate attachment that comes from thinking it's the only source of your worth. Sam started noticing how differently they moved through the world. They were less reactive because they weren't carrying around unacknowledged feelings that exploded at random moments. They were more present because they weren't constantly seeking something outside themselves to make them feel okay. They became what Buddhism calls your own island, your own refuge. Not isolated, but self-contained. Not needing the world to behave in a particular way for them to be okay. I want to invite you into a practice that Sam discovered. Imagine you're having tea with your heart. Not metaphorically, literally set aside time. Maybe make an actual cup of tea and have a conversation. Ask your heart, what do you want me to know today? Then listen. Not with your head, but with your whole being. What sensations arise? What images? What words? Your heart might say things like, I'm tired of pretending everything's okay. I miss creativity in my life. I'm scared about the future. I'm grateful for this quiet moment. Whatever comes up, respond the way you would to a dear friend who was sharing something vulnerable. Thank you for telling me. That makes sense. can I support you? This isn't therapy, it's friendship. It's developing a relationship with the wisest, most compassionate part of yourself. Buddhism teaches that within each of us is Buddha nature, the capacity for wisdom, compassion, and understanding. But most of us never learn to access it because we're too busy listening to all the other voices. When you cultivate this inner relationship, something magical happens. You stop feeling so alone in the world because you're never actually alone. You have yourself. You stop feeling so lost because you have an internal compass. You stop feeling so broken because you have an internal healer. Take a breath with me now. Feel your heart beating. That rhythm has been with you since before you were born. It will be with you until your last moment. It's the most faithful friend you'll ever have. What if you started treating it that way? And what happens when someone who's learned to befriend themselves discovers the beauty of being alone without being lonely? That's where our journey takes us next. There came an evening when Sam found themselves alone in their apartment, really alone for the first time in months. No phone calls to make, no social media to scroll, no background TV to fill the silence. Their partner was out of town, friends were busy, and for once, Sam hadn't scheduled anything to avoid the emptiness. And instead of the familiar panic that usually came with unstructured time, something unexpected happened. Relief. It was like taking off shoes that had been too tight all day. The house seemed to exhale around them. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of possibility, full of peace, full of themselves. Sam made a simple dinner and ate it slowly, actually tasting the food instead of wolfing it down while multitasking. They sat by the window and watched the light change as the sun set. They listened to the sounds of the city winding down. They felt their own presence in the room. When was the last time you enjoyed your own company? When was the last time you felt genuinely content to be alone with yourself? Most of us have become addicted to distraction. We reach for our phones the moment we feel a hint of boredom or loneliness. We fill every silence with noise, every empty moment with activity. We've become afraid of our own minds, our own thoughts, our own company. But Sam was discovering something profound, the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is feeling disconnected, even when you're surrounded by people. It's the ache of thinking you're the only one who feels this way, thinks these thoughts, struggles with these things. Loneliness says, I am alone, and that's terrible. Solitude says, I am alone, and that's beautiful. Solitude is conscious aloneness. It's choosing to be with yourself not because you have to, but because you want to. It's discovering that your own company can be delightful, nourishing, even inspiring. Buddhism has always recognized solitude as essential for spiritual development. Not because connection with others isn't important, but because if you can't be peacefully alone with yourself, you'll always be dependent on others for your emotional regulation. Sam started to understand why they'd been so desperate for constant connection. They'd been running from themselves. They were afraid that if they stopped moving, stop talking, stop doing, they'd have to face what? Their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own mortality. But when they finally stopped running and turned to face themselves, they didn't find a monster. They found a human being who was doing their best, who had been through difficult things, who had dreams and fears and hopes, just like everyone else. They found someone worth spending time with. As Sam got more comfortable with solitude, they began to notice things they'd never seen before, not just in the external world, but in their internal landscape. They noticed their natural rhythms, that they were more creative in the morning, more reflective in the evening, that they needed more quiet time than they'd been allowing themselves, that their body held tension in specific places when they were stressed. They noticed their patterns of thought, how their mind would spiral into worry about imaginary future scenarios, how they'd replay conversations from years ago, how they'd make up stories about what other people were thinking about them. But instead of judging these patterns, they became curious about them, like a scientist studying their own consciousness. Oh, there's the worry spiral again. Interesting. What triggered that? This is what Buddhism calls mindfulness, friendly awareness of what's happening in your mind without getting swept away by it. It's like becoming the sky rather than being the clouds. The clouds, thoughts and emotions, still come and go, but you're the vast, unchanging awareness that holds them all. Sam discovered that their mind was actually quite entertaining when they weren't taking every thought so seriously. They started having conversations with their anxiety. Hello again, anxiety. What imaginary catastrophe are you worried about today? They'd greet their sadness like an old friend. I see you there, sadness. What are you trying to tell me? This wasn't denial or spiritual bypassing. It was developing a healthier relationship with their own mental and emotional life. There's an old Buddhist saying, you are your own monastery. You don't need to go to a mountain cave or isolated retreat center to find peace. You can create sacred space wherever you are, starting with your own presence. Sam began treating their alone time as sacred. Not in a religious way, but with reverence for the opportunity to know themselves more deeply. They created little rituals around solitude, lighting a candle, making tea mindfully, sitting in the same chair by the window. They started what they called sacred solitude dates, intentional time alone doing things that nourished their soul. Sometimes it was reading poetry. Sometimes it was walking in nature without podcasts or music. Sometimes it was just sitting and breathing. The beautiful thing about solitude is that it's completely honest. There's no performance, no mask, no need to be anyone other than exactly who you are in that moment. You can feel sad without having to explain why. You can feel joy without having to share it. You can be confused without having to have answers. Sam realized they'd been so busy managing other people's impressions of them that they'd lost touch with their own authentic experience. In solitude, authenticity was the only option. Something shifted when Sam stopped experiencing alone time as something that happened to them and started experiencing it as something they chose. Instead of, I have to be alone tonight, it became, I get to be alone tonight. They started noticing how much richer their connections with others became when they weren't desperate for company. When you're not starving for attention, you can actually be present with people instead of just consuming their presence to fill your emptiness. Relationships became more authentic because Sam was showing up as a whole person rather than a collection of unmet needs. They could listen deeply because they weren't frantically waiting for their turn to talk. They could offer genuine support because they weren't depleted from running from themselves. Buddhism teaches that you can only love others as much as you love yourself. If you're at war with solitude, you're at war with a fundamental aspect of being human. But when you make peace with your own company, you become a gift to everyone in your life. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat in complete silence for more than 5 minutes? No music, no phones, no TV, no talking. Just you and the space around you. If that idea makes you uncomfortable, you're not alone. Our culture has trained us to fear silence, to fill every moment with noise and stimulation. But silence isn't empty, it's full of possibility. Try this right now. Put down whatever you're holding. Turn off any background noise. Close your eyes if that feels safe. And just listen. Listen to the sounds around you. Listen to your breath. Listen to your heartbeat. Listen to the space between sounds. What do you notice? Maybe restlessness at first. Maybe the urge to reach for your phone. Maybe anxiety about wasting time. That's normal. But if you stay with it, you might notice something else. A settling. A deepening. A coming home to yourself. Sam discovered that silence wasn't the absence of something, it was the presence of everything. In silence, they could hear their intuition. They could feel their body's wisdom. They could access a clarity that was always available but usually drowned out by noise. This doesn't mean becoming a hermit or avoiding human connection. It means developing the capacity to be peacefully alone, so that when you're with others, you're truly present, rather than just seeking distraction from yourself. I want to invite you to experiment with solitude this week. Not the kind that happens when everyone else is busy, but intentional, chosen solitude. Find a space in your home, even if it's just a corner of a room, that can be your solitude sanctuary. It doesn't need to be fancy. Maybe it's a comfortable chair, maybe a cushion on the floor, maybe a spot by the window. Spend just 15 minutes there without any agenda. No phone, no book, no goals. Just be there with yourself. Notice what comes up. Boredom, anxiety, restlessness, curiosity. All of it is welcome. If your mind starts spinning with all the things you should be doing, just notice that and gently return to simply being present. If emotions arise, greet them like old friends. If insights come, receive them with gratitude. The point isn't to achieve anything or feel any particular way. The point is to practice being comfortable in your own presence, to discover that you are not just tolerable company for yourself, you might actually be delightful. Buddhism teaches that within each person is a Buddha nature, a capacity for wisdom, compassion, and peace that's always available. But most of us never access it because we're too busy looking outside ourselves for what's already within. Solitude is how you come home to this inner wisdom. How you remember that you are not just a collection of thoughts and feelings and reactions, but the awareness that experiences all of these things. And when you know yourself as this vast, peaceful awareness, something beautiful becomes possible, recognizing that this same awareness, this same Buddha nature, lives in everyone you meet. But first, you have to be willing to be alone with yourself long enough to discover who you really are underneath all the stories you've been telling yourself. What happens when that discovery deepens into something that feels like coming home to yourself for the very first time? That's where our next movement takes us. There came a moment, and it arrived so quietly that Sam almost missed it, when they realized they weren't looking for anything anymore. Not searching for the perfect relationship to complete them, not chasing the next achievement to prove their worth, not waiting for circumstances to align so they could finally be happy. They were sitting in their corner chair, drinking morning coffee, watching dust motes dance in the sunlight. Nothing extraordinary was happening. No breakthrough meditation, no life-changing insight, no dramatic revelation. Just an ordinary Tuesday morning that felt complete. For the first time in their adult life, Sam wasn't somewhere else in their mind. They weren't planning the next thing, rehashing the last thing, or wishing this thing was different. They were just here. Present. Content. And in that contentment, they realized something that changed everything. The home they'd been searching for their entire life wasn't a place, a person, or a circumstance. It was this. This feeling of being at peace with what is, right now, exactly as it is. Have you ever had a moment like that? When the endless seeking just stops? When you realize that what you've been searching for was never actually missing? Most of us spend our lives feeling like we're in the wrong place, with the wrong people, living the wrong life. We carry this constant sense that we're supposed to be somewhere else, that there's some other version of reality where we finally fit, finally belong, finally feel at home. But what if home isn't a destination you arrive at? What if it's a way of being you can access right now? When the Buddha spoke about awakening, he often used the metaphor of coming home. Not to a physical place, but to your true nature, the peaceful awareness that you are beneath all the temporary thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Buddhism teaches that we have what's called Buddha nature, an inherent capacity for wisdom, compassion, and inner peace that can never be damaged or destroyed. But most of us spend our lives looking for this peace everywhere, except where it actually lives, within our own consciousness. It's like spending your whole life searching for your glasses while they're sitting on top of your head. The peace, the love, the sense of belonging you're seeking, it's not out there waiting to be found. It's here, now, in this moment, in the very awareness that's reading these words. Sam was beginning to understand what the mystics and sages have always known, You are not a human being searching for a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. And home is remembering this truth. The external circumstances of Sam's life hadn't changed dramatically. They still had the same job, the same relationship, the same challenges. But their relationship to these circumstances had transformed completely. Instead of needing life to be different to feel okay, they could feel okay regardless of what life was serving up. This doesn't mean becoming passive or not caring about outcomes. It means finding an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on things going your way. Here's the beautiful paradox Sam discovered. The moment you stop searching for home is the moment you realize you've been home all along. The seeking itself was what kept them from recognizing what was already here. It's like being in a boat, desperately rowing toward shore, not realizing the boat is already docked and you can step onto land anytime you want. The rowing, the seeking, striving, trying to get somewhere else, is what keeps you from noticing you've already arrived. Sam started to see how much energy they'd been spending trying to get to a future moment when they would finally feel complete. I'll be happy when I find the right person. I'll feel successful when I reach this goal. I'll be at peace when I solve this problem. But happiness, success, peace, these aren't destinations you arrive at. They're ways of traveling. They're available right now, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this moment of being alive. Buddhism calls this suchness, the profound ordinariness of what is. Not magical or mystical, just real. Just here. Just now. Sam began to notice suchness everywhere. In the way light fell across their desk. In the feeling of water washing over their hands. In the sound of their neighbor's dog barking. In the sensation of breath moving in and out of their body. These weren't peak spiritual experiences. They were moments of recognizing the sacred in the absolutely ordinary. Of feeling at home in whatever was happening. One of the most profound shifts was that Sam stopped feeling like a visitor in their own life. For years, they'd felt like they were auditioning for the role of themselves, trying to prove they deserved to be here, constantly checking for approval and validation. Now they realized, this is my life. Not a dress rehearsal, not a practice round, not a test to see if I qualify for the real thing. This moment, right here, is the real thing. They stopped waiting for permission to take up space, to have opinions, to feel their feelings, to want what they wanted. They stopped apologizing for their existence and started inhabiting it fully. This shift showed up in small ways at first. Sam started expressing preferences they'd been hiding. Actually, I don't really like Thai food. I'd prefer to leave the party early. I need some quiet time before we make this decision. But it went deeper than preferences. Sam began to honor their own rhythms, their own values, their own truth, even when it didn't match what others expected. They stopped performing the version of themselves they thought others wanted, and started showing up as who they actually were. The result? Instead of feeling like they had to earn love, they felt lovable just as they were. Instead of feeling like they had to prove their worth, they felt inherently valuable. Instead of feeling like they were trying to belong somewhere, they felt like they belonged everywhere because they belonged to themselves. As Sam settled into this feeling of being at home in themselves, they discovered a love that was completely different from anything they'd experienced before. Not the needy love that says, "I love you because you make me feel good about myself." Not the conditional love that says, "I love you as long as you meet my expectations." This was love that needed nothing in return. Love that existed for its own sake. Love that flowed freely because it came from fullness, not emptiness. Buddhism calls this loving kindness, or metta, love without attachment, compassion without conditions. It starts with loving yourself not because you're perfect, but because you exist. Because you're part of this beautiful, messy, magnificent human experience. Sam began to feel this unconditional love toward themselves first. Not based on achievements or approval, but on the simple fact of being alive, being conscious, being here. They started treating themselves with the same tenderness they'd offer to a beloved child or dear friend. And here's what's magical about this kind of self-love. The more you have, the more you can give. When you're not desperately seeking love from others, you can offer love freely. When you're not trying to fill your own emptiness, you can help heal others' emptiness. Sam noticed their relationships transforming. They could be present with their partner's stress without taking it personally. They could listen to friends' problems without trying to fix everything. They could offer support without keeping score. They became what Buddhism calls a refuge, someone who emanates peace and safety because they've found peace and safety within themselves. Right now, I want to invite you to come home. Not to a physical place, but to this moment, to your own presence, to the awareness that's experiencing these words. Put your hand on your heart. Feel it beating. This heart has been with you through every joy and sorrow, every triumph and failure, every moment of confusion and clarity. It's your most faithful companion. Take a deep breath and feel yourself arriving here. Not coming from somewhere else, but recognizing that you're already here. You've always been here. The here that is your own consciousness, your own being, your own existence. Look around the space you're in. Really see it. Notice the colors, the textures, the way light and shadow play. This is your life, right now. Not a pause between more important moments, but the only moment that actually exists. Feel your body in this space. The weight of your body, the contact with whatever you're sitting or standing on. You belong here. You don't need permission to exist, to take up space, to be exactly as you are in this moment. Now expand that feeling of belonging to your inner landscape. Your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, they all belong here too. You don't need to be different, better, more evolved, or less human. You can be home in yourself exactly as you are. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment isn't about becoming someone else. It's about recognizing who you've always been underneath all the stories you tell yourself about who you should be. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are not incomplete and searching for your other half. You are not lost and looking for the way home. You are home. You have always been home. You just forgot for a while. And when you remember, really remember, that you are already whole, already worthy, already belonging to this moment and this life, what becomes possible? Living from that wholeness, offering that love, sharing that peace with a world that desperately needs people who remember who they really are. That's where our final movement takes us. Sam woke up on what seemed like an ordinary Wednesday morning, but something was different. Not in the external world. The same sun was rising, the same birds were singing, the same city was waking up around them. But Sam was seeing it all through different eyes. They got dressed not because they had to present a certain image, but because they wanted to honor their body with care. They ate breakfast not while scrolling through bad news, but while actually tasting their food and feeling grateful for nourishment. They looked in the mirror and instead of cataloging flaws, they saw a human being who was doing their best. On the way to work, Sam noticed things they'd walked past for years. The way morning light caught the leaves of a tree. The sound of children laughing in a nearby playground. The smile of the barista who handed them coffee. It wasn't that these things hadn't been there before. It was that Sam was finally present enough to see them. But here's what was really different. Sam felt like they had something to give. For most of their life, they'd moved through the world like a human-shaped hole, unconsciously looking for what they could get from each interaction. Validation, approval, entertainment, distraction, some kind of proof that they mattered. Now they felt full enough to contribute to the fullness of others. Have you ever noticed the difference between being around someone who needs something from you versus someone who has something to offer? There's a different energy entirely. One drains, the other nourishes. Sam was becoming a nourisher. At work that day, a colleague was having a meltdown about a project that had gone wrong. In the past, Sam would have either tried to fix everything, seeking approval for being helpful, or avoided the situation entirely, protecting their own emotional energy. But this time, they simply listened. Not with the part of their mind that was formulating advice or judgment, but with their whole presence. They offered what Buddhism calls the gift of awareness, being fully present with someone's pain without trying to make it go away. "This is really hard," Sam said simply. "I can see how frustrated you are." Their colleague visibly relaxed. "Thank you. Everyone keeps trying to tell me it's not that bad or offering solutions, but you're the first person to just see what I'm going through." Sam realized they'd just experienced something profound. Their own healing had become a gift they could offer others. All those months of learning to be present with their own pain had taught them how to be present with someone else's pain. This is what Buddhism calls the Bodhisattva path, using your own awakening to help awaken others. Not by preaching or teaching, but by embodying the peace, compassion, and wisdom you've cultivated. Every person who heals themselves contributes to the healing of the world. When you stop adding your unconscious pain to the collective unconscious pain, you become part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Sam began to understand that love wasn't just something you felt for special people in special moments. It was a way of being in the world. A lens through which you could see everything and everyone. Love as presence, being fully here instead of half absent. Love as patience, allowing things to unfold in their own time. Love as kindness, speaking and acting with gentleness. Love as acceptance, embracing what is, instead of demanding what should be. Love as generosity, giving your attention, your care, your authentic self. This doesn't mean becoming a pushover or saying yes to everything. Buddhism teaches fierce compassion, love that includes boundaries, truth-telling, and sometimes saying no. But it's all done from a place of wanting the highest good for everyone, including yourself. Sam started small, offering their full attention when people spoke to them instead of thinking about what they'd say next. Letting people merge in traffic without road rage. Saying please and thank you like they actually meant it. Smiling at strangers not because they had to, but because they could. They began to see every interaction as an opportunity to practice love. Not romantic love or even personal love, but universal love. The recognition that every person they encountered was fighting their own battles, carrying their own pain, searching for their own peace. As Sam moved through their day from this place of fullness rather than emptiness, something magical happened. Ordinary moments became sacred. Not because anything external changed, but because they were bringing their whole self to each moment. Washing dishes became a meditation in presence. Walking became an opportunity to feel their body moving through space. Conversations became chances to practice deep listening. Even frustrating moments became opportunities to practice patience and compassion. Sam was discovering what mystics have always known. Enlightenment isn't about transcending daily life. It's about bringing consciousness to daily life. It's not about escaping the human experience, but about fully embracing it with love. The grocery store became a temple where they could practice patience in long lines. Traffic became a meditation on acceptance. Difficult people became teachers in compassion. Every moment became a chance to choose love over fear, presence over distraction, connection over separation. This is what Buddhism calls engaged spirituality, bringing your inner transformation into the world, letting your practice serve not just your own peace but the peace of all beings. Sam started noticing how their transformation was affecting everyone around them. Their partner mentioned feeling more relaxed when they were together. Their friends said they felt heard and understood in conversations. Colleagues sought them out when they needed to talk through problems. This wasn't because Sam was trying to be different or better. It was because when you're at peace with yourself, peace radiates from you naturally. When you're not desperately seeking love, you become a source of love. When you're not running from your own pain, you can sit peacefully with others' pain. Buddhism teaches that all beings are interconnected. When one person heals, it affects the whole web of existence. Sam was experiencing this directly. Their personal healing was becoming a gift to everyone they encountered. But it went deeper than just being nice to people. Sam found themselves naturally drawn to ways they could serve, volunteering at a local shelter, mentoring someone at work, simply being the kind of person who remembered to check on friends going through difficult times. This service wasn't coming from obligation or guilt, but from a natural overflow of fullness. When your cup is full, it naturally spills over to nourish others. Right now, I want to invite you to feel into the love that's already present in your heart. Not love for any particular person or thing, but the love that's your essential nature, the warmth, the kindness, the compassion that exists at your core. Put your hand on your heart and breathe into that space. Feel it expanding with each breath. This love doesn't need to be earned or deserved. It's not dependent on you being perfect or having your life figured out. It's the love that exists simply because you exist. Now imagine taking this love with you into your day. What would it look like to approach each interaction from this place of fullness rather than need? How would you speak to the grocery store clerk? How would you respond when someone cuts you off in traffic? How would you listen when a friend needs to vent? This isn't about being fake positive or pretending everything is wonderful. It's about bringing your authentic presence, including your genuine care for the well-being of others, to whatever arises. Buddhism teaches a practice called loving kindness meditation, where you extend wishes for happiness and peace to yourself and others. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be at peace. May I live with ease. But the real practice isn't on the meditation cushion, it's in daily life. It's remembering that every person you encounter is doing their best with what they have. It's choosing to respond to others' pain with compassion rather than judgment. It's recognizing that we're all walking each other home. You don't need to wait until you're fully healed or completely enlightened to start living from love. You can start right now, right here, with whatever capacity for love you have today. Because love isn't something you perfect, it's something you practice. And when you practice love consistently, something beautiful happens. You become the person you've been waiting for. You become the friend you wish you had, the support you need, the peace you seek. You stop waiting for the world to change and start being the change. You stop waiting for love to find you and start being love in action. This is how one person's healing becomes a gift to the whole world. This is how coming home to yourself becomes coming home to life itself. And this is how an ordinary human being discovers they have the capacity to live extraordinarily, not by achieving great things, but by bringing great love to ordinary things. What happens when you remember that this capacity has been within you all along? When you realize that the day you stop waiting for someone to save you is the day you discover you are the one you've been waiting for. That recognition, that remembering, that coming home to the love you are, that's where our journey together finds its completion. As our time together draws to a close, I want you to take a moment to feel where you are right now. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. Feel the ground beneath you, the air around you, the life flowing through you. 90 minutes ago, we began with a simple question. What if the person who can heal you has been here all along? And through Sam's journey, which is really our journey, humanity's journey, we've discovered that this isn't just hope or wishful thinking. truth. You've always been the one you've been waiting for. The love you've been seeking has been the love you are. The home you've been searching for has been the home of your own heart. This doesn't mean the journey ends here. In many ways, it's just beginning. Because now you know something you didn't know before. You have everything you need within you to meet whatever life brings with grace, with wisdom, with compassion. What we've explored together isn't just beautiful philosophy, it's a way of living. A way of moving through the world that transforms not just your own experience, but the experience of everyone you encounter. Some days you'll remember this truth easily. You'll feel connected to the peace and love that are your nature. Other days, you'll forget. You'll fall back into old patterns of seeking outside yourself, of believing your worth depends on external circumstances. And that's okay. That's human. The path isn't about perfection, it's about returning. Again and again, returning to the truth of who you are beneath all the stories you tell yourself about who you should be. Each time you remember, each time you choose presence over distraction, love over fear, compassion over judgment, you're not just healing yourself. You're contributing to the healing of our world. Because this planet needs people who remember who they really are. It needs people who can offer their presence instead of their performance. It needs people who can love without needing anything in return. It needs people who have come home to themselves and can help others find their way home too. If this journey has touched something in you, I invite you to share it. Not because I need you to, but because the world needs more people who understand what we've explored together. Leave a comment below and tell us, what did you discover about yourself during these 90 minutes? What will you take from Sam's story into your own life? How will you practice coming home to yourself this week? Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Your story might be the permission someone else needs to begin their own journey home. And if you'd like to continue this exploration together, subscribe to Where Hearts Rest. This isn't just a channel, it's a community of people committed to remembering who they really are and living from that truth. Before we part ways, I want to offer you a blessing. Place your hand on your heart one more time. Feel that steady rhythm that has been with you through every moment of this journey, through every moment of your life. May you remember that you are already whole. May you trust the wisdom of your own heart. May you be gentle with yourself as you learn and grow. May you offer yourself the same compassion you would offer a beloved friend. May you find peace not in having everything figured out, but in being exactly where you are. And may you discover, again and again, that the love you seek is the love you are. This has been a sacred gift, this time we've shared, this journey we've taken together. Thank you for bringing your open heart, your willingness to explore, your courage to consider that maybe, just maybe, you've been the answer to your own prayers all along. Until our hearts rest together again, be well, be kind to yourself, and remember, you are already home.